Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Rebecca Stummy. I'm the producer of live programming and events here at LAist, and I'm so happy that you're here for the Story Collider tonight. Thank you so much. I will turn it over to your host for this evening, Bryan Kett.
All right, yeah. Hi, thanks for coming out. This is so nice. I know Becca, I'm Bryan. Hi. I know Becca just did a real official survey. Just by round of applause, who's been to a Story Collider event before? Okay, and by round of applause, who's never been here before, ever? Great. Where have you been? Thanks for coming, especially with the DNC and all that excitement here. Thanks for braving the heat as well. So here's the thing. Just a little bit about Story Collider. We are a nonprofit headquartered in New York City. We have shows, kind of affiliates like this all over the country, everywhere from Seattle to St. Louis to Atlanta to Boston. So if you're here for the Boston show, you're on the wrong coast. But that's the bad news. The good news is that you are here in the Los Angeles chapter right now, and it is wonderful. So what we do is Story Collider's mission is sort of to help humanize science, okay? And because like science almost has this delta in front of it where everyone is kind of afraid of it. No one's even thought about it since high school chemistry, right? You have these vague recollections of the periodic table at the front of the room, and no one really wants to deal with that. But science binds us, it galvanizes us, it helps us kind of navigate. It affects all of us, right? It's part of this human experience that we have. And so that's our ethos here, that's our mission, that's why we're here. So we have people share stories to help humanize their relationship with science. And some of those people are scientists, who you're gonna hear from tonight sharing their stories. And some of them are just regular folks who have stories to tell that are adjacent to science, which is pretty much all of us. Here's the thing, though. Tonight, we have such a fun lineup. They're all sitting over here. Okay, we have 4 tellers. Okay, we have, and I'm going to go through this, one by one. But we have, give them a round of applause, everybody. Darcy Little Badger. Yeah. We got Tim Lopez over here. We got Christopher Rivas. And we have Rose Abdu. What you're going to do is you are going to hear stories from each of these individuals. Every Story Collider show has a theme. And in looking at all these stories, and I've met some of these individuals recently in the last year or so, some I've known for many years. They're kind of handpicked just for this wonderful evening. And going through and looking at all these stories when they're kind of laid out on the table, one theme kind of emerged, and that is the theme of taking the plunge. Kind of going all in and committing to something and kind of making peace with one's circumstances. And I love that theme because I don't ever want to take the plunge. I'm a guy who likes it on shore, right? Like if you want to go do that, have a great time, I'll root for you. But I really I'm going to just keep my distance. And I was thinking about this on the drive over, like, why is that? And it really comes back to, in this town especially, this notion of online dating, which is really the core feature of really taking the plunge. And it reminds me, right when I moved out here, quick story for you before we get started, on the theme of taking the plunge. I signed up for all the apps, as one does, and I matched with a woman, and I set a lunch date, because that's sexy. And she goes, come pick me up at my place. So I drove out to the valley. I didn't know where the valley was, so I drove for like 6 hours to get to her place. And I picked her up, and everything was nice. We had a nice lunch. And then after lunch, she just leaned over the table, and she said, do you want to get out of here and just head to an animal shelter? And I said, what does that mean? And she clarified that she just wanted to go to an animal shelter and like pet the animals and look at the animals. And I'm like, I've come this far, let's do it. And so I drove, and she told me where to go, turn by turn, and we walked into this animal shelter, and my face just swelled shut due to allergies, just totally shut. I'm very allergic to cats. I didn't want to ruin the date, so I just watched her, squinting at her as she kind of worked from cage to cage, petting each of them through the bars. And I thought, like, this is sweet, right? Like, this can work. These can be our allergies. But then she just became irate, just like livid and angry. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, it's Misty. And I said, what does that mean? And she clarified. She goes, it's my childhood cat. And I said, what? And she goes, I grew up in the area. My parents still live nearby, and this is the cat that I grew up with. And I looked in the cage, and it looked like every other cat I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, let's just take a step back for a moment. She goes, no, I bet my dad dropped Misty off the shelter. My dad hates Misty. I can't, oh my gosh. So she calls her mom on speakerphone. And meanwhile, I'm still totally swollen shut. She goes, Mom, where's Misty? And her mom goes, Misty's at home. She goes, don't buy that. So she called her dad on speakerphone. She goes, Dad, where's Misty? And her dad goes, Misty's at home. She goes, really? Because I'm in an animal shelter right now, looking at a cat that looks an awful lot like Misty. And then her dad caved, and he admitted to everything. And he said, okay, here's what you need to know. I'm sorry, but I dropped Misty off at some random shelter because I hate Misty. And so now she's sobbing. I'm swollen shut. We go and talk to the shelter manager, but there's a quarantine on all recently admitted animals, like a 48-hour window, so we can't get the cat out. They say you can come back tomorrow, so we leave. And I still can't see well enough to drive. She's telling me where to turn while she's sobbing. We finally get back to her house, and she says, we should do this again sometime. And it's like, we didn't, but that's why I stay on the shore, right? But here's the thing. Taking the plunge is part of the human experience. That's why we're here tonight. We're going to hear from those 4 tellers. So for our first teller, I met our first teller at the Moth main stage here this spring downtown. And when I met her at rehearsal. I'm like, okay, here's the thing about Story Collider. We're a nonprofit. Headquartered, I gave her the whole spiel, right? And she's like, okay, I'll do this. So our first teller is a Lip and Apache writer. Her critically acclaimed debut novel, Alatsoe, was featured in Time magazine as one of the best 100 fantasy books of all time. Yeah, let that sit in. I like that. I like that round of applause. Her second fantasy novel, A Snake Falls to Earth, received a Newbery honor and is on the National Book Awards long list. Her third novel, Shene Lende, is the prequel to Alatsoe and has received 6-star reviews. She's married to a veterinarian named Taryn. Please welcome to the stage. And here's, I'm going to say the name, but I really need, okay, like really, please, it's hard to go first. I killed it, right, obviously. Okay, there's no question there. But please give a very roaring round of applause to Darcy Little Badger.
Yes. I think that's mouth level. Yes, perfect.
Nailed it. Have fun.
Hello. Hey, my first memory of the ocean is not actually my own. It's a story that my mother told me about her childhood, 1967, when Hurricane Beulah crashed onto southern Texas, and the rains were so intense that the rivers overflowed, and the dams could not really hold it all. And so my mother, her 8 siblings, and my grandparents, they were in their house thinking they'd survived the worst of the storm, when there came a knock on the door and this frantic call to evacuate. No, the little family didn't really have time to pack their stuff, so they left with their clothes on their back. And as they were leaving, my grandpa saw the cows were mooing and stomping their feet. And so he went over to the gate of their pen and opened it, hoping that they could save themselves. And then the family evacuated to high ground. When they came back to the house, the floodwaters had reached the rooftop, essentially destroying almost everything, things like toys and clothes and documents and photos. And my mom still talks about the memories that were lost to the muddy waters. But there is one silver lining. The cows were on a nearby hill. They'd managed to escape and were waiting to be rescued. So in the months, the years that followed, there was this domino cascade of hardships triggered by this storm. Stuff like displacement, poverty, illness resulted in my grandfather. He died. And so what this story kind of taught me is that the ocean, I'd lived in landlocked areas when I was a childhood. I didn't have much experience with the ocean to build my own memories. And so I carried this story, and it taught me that the ocean could swallow a city. It could destroy a life. And that was scary. And I really didn't know much else about the ocean until I was in college. Now, when I was a freshman, sophomore, I thought I was going to be an English major. I wanted to write stories, and I figured I'd go there, I'd do my dissertation, a collection of short stories, or maybe I'd write a great American novel. But my freshman year, I applied to the creative writing program, and I was rejected. So in my sophomore year, I applied again, and I was rejected again. And it was around this time of this second rejection that I had to take a science course. Because in this Ivy League institution, they wanted their students to have an interdisciplinary education. So even though I wanted to focus on English, I had to take a science course, a history course, a philosophy course, and so on. And I was just like scrolling through the course workbook, seeing what they were offering, and I asked my friends, what would be a good science class that's accessible to people who maybe don't have the strongest background in science? Now, don't get me wrong, in high school, I'd aced my science and math classes. I enjoyed them, found them to be fun and interesting, but I didn't have the best confidence because I was this kid who'd bounced around in public schools, Iowa, Vermont, Texas. And I was surrounded by students. Some of them had gone to these intensive private institutions that had world-class laboratories and STEM tracks and even robotics clubs, which I thought was amazing. And plus, my school did something called grade deflation, where only about 30% of a class could receive an A. So I really just wanted to give myself a chance. And the answer I kept getting back was Intro to Oceanography. Now, I was wary of the ocean itself, but this class, we weren't going to be jumping into the Atlantic and going swimming or anything like that. We were going into a lecture hall that was kind of shaped like a coliseum and listening to the professor talk about concepts. And so I wasn't stressed out when I applied and when I started attending classes, and something really cool actually happened because for the first time, I was learning facets of the world that I'd never known before. Things like how the ocean is associated with atmospheric circulation, how phytoplankton are just as important photosynthesizers as the trees that surrounded me on land. I even learned how hurricanes are born and grow, and they crash onto the land and sputter off and die. And so one class became 2 classes, became 3 classes. And the next thing I know, I'm on an airplane flying to Bermuda with my oceanography class to visit a marine research institution. And I sat near the window seat, and as we were approaching our destination, I looked out and down, and I saw that the water was this sapphire blue. It was so clear and calm. As we got closer to the island, these pale patches of coral turned the Sargasso Sea into this quilt of life. And this was a face of the ocean that I didn't know from my secondhand memory. And as the days passed and we did this field trip, I learned more things about the ocean. I witnessed fireworms spawning, and their bioluminescence was more delicate and rare than that of lightning bugs. I mean, I smelled waves crashing. I felt the warmth of the shallows and little silver fish that were tickling at my toes. I even witnessed the birth of coral in these little nurseries. And eventually, the professor gathered us around and said we were going to get some field experience. And by field, I mean the open ocean. So at dawn, all of us students gathered there on the docks. And there was this research vessel that was just large enough to hold my entire class on deck. So as we boarded, I remember the ship was bobbing. It was kind of like a mechanical bull at the lowest setting. And as I was stepping on, it was not enough to knock me over, but I felt a little bit unbalanced, a little unsettled. So we sat on these benches, and the ship started going off to the open ocean, and we were vrooming over these low waves, and the spray was crashing into my face, cooling me down, while the sun was beating on the back of my neck, and it was so warm. And there were these flying fish disturbed by the boat. They were gliding alongside us, and some of them were going as far as paper airplanes would, which I thought was really cool. And eventually, we were far out there that I could not see the land, not even a smudge on the horizon. And we were like hundreds, if not thousands of meters of water beneath us. This was the open ocean, the Sargasso Sea. And so everyone, we learned how to do scientific things such as collecting phytoplankton using these really fine nets, or we checked the clarity of the water by lowering this black and white disc down and down until we couldn't see it anymore, and then we pulled it back up again. We divided into teams, took water samples. I was on team phosphate. And as I was eating my granola bar, a professor stood up and he said to us, "Who wants to go for a swim?" So I want to make it clear, I did as a child learn how to swim in public pools, and I'd visited beaches, especially that week. I'd seen several in Bermuda. But I never had a chance to swim in the open ocean and thought this might be the only opportunity to do so. And because of that, and because my peers were really excited, and because the professor was there and he wouldn't let anything happen to us, but if something did happen, there were lifesavers on board. So all these things, I was like, oh yeah, sure. But none of us were dressed for swimming. We were in our plains clothes, so I was in my jeans and my t-shirt, and I had a windbreaker. And I took off the windbreaker and stored it with my sunglasses. And then went over to this ladder at the back of the boat. Now, a lot of my peers, they were just jumping into the water, cannonballs and the like. But I wanted to take things more slow. So first I dipped my toes in, and the water was warm, kind of like a bath, which I found to be very pleasant. So then I dipped my feet in, and then I dipped my knees all the way up there, and then suddenly the ship bucked, and it kind of like pushed me forward. And before I knew it, I was floating, swimming alongside the ship. And that first moment it's almost indescribable. Floating above hundreds, if not thousands of meters of water, you feel weightless, almost like an astronaut on Earth. But I was wearing, unfortunately, bell-bottom jeans. So here's the thing about denim when it gets wet. It actually gets pretty heavy. So it took a couple of seconds before gravity reasserted itself. And I realized that my pants were going to be a problem. They were getting heavier and heavier and trying to drag me down to Davy Jones' locker. And these small little waves that seemed like nothing, from aboard the ship, they were splashing over my mouth and my nose, and I was sputtering and spread my arms and try to remember everything that I'd learned in beginning swimmer classes, like how to fill your lungs, take a deep breath, and then float on your back. But the pants were really making it difficult. And the ship, it was farther away from me than it had been when I first jumped in. So I was like, it's either caught in a current, or more frighteningly, maybe I am, and I'm being pulled away. And I realized I had to make a decision, a choice. Either take off my pants in front of all of my peers, or just let them drag me down. And so, in a last-ditch effort to save my dignity, I just doggy paddled with all my might towards that ladder. And I reached out and I grasped the lower rung, and I pulled myself rung by rung, just like shedding droplets of the Sargasso Sea, until I flopped onto my back on deck, looking like this wet cat, all bedraggled. And I stared up at the sky, and it was blue as the ocean, and as eternal it seemed. And that's when I realized this is what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to not be an English major. I wanted to study the ocean, because that was a scary moment, yes, but more than that, I was just fascinated that everything below me that I couldn't see in that darkness, all the life forms, all the biological, physical, chemical processes, the unknown, and yet it could be known. And so we returned to the US a couple days later, and I went to the geoscience department, and I got my junior advisor cementing my decision to major in geosciences and study the ocean. And I even returned to Bermuda the next summer. I went on this 2-week research cruise, which is a story in and of itself, because I do get seasick. And while I was there in Bermuda, a hurricane actually was sweeping towards the island. And fortunately, it downgraded to a tropical storm right before it hit. And I remember hunkering down in the research station with some of my friends, the people who worked there, and the wind was rattling the windows and pressing the doors shut, and the water was drumming on the roof and blowing sideways against the walls. But I did not feel a trace of fear, because I had predicted this storm, understood it, and I respected its danger. I wasn't going out swimming during the tropical storm, but I just waited there for it to pass, and then calmly went out and helped clean up the damage and destruction that had left behind. And I hoped in that moment that my mom, my grandparents would have been proud. And I still had a lot to learn. I mean, I still do have a lot to learn. But what I knew is that the ocean had so many faces, and it seemed so alien to me, and yet it was every bit a part of the world that I grew up in, as Texas and Vermont and Iowa. And so I went and I got my PhD in oceanography. I studied Karenia brevis, which is this type of plankton that produces red tides in the Gulf. And now I live just a short walk away from the Pacific Ocean, where I go sometimes to work, writing my stories. I'm inspired by those waves crashing ashore. So I guess if there's a takeaway to this story, it's probably this. It's that sometimes the best way to confront our fears is to understand them. Thank you very much.
Give it up for Darcy. That's a good story when Darcy's up here on stage and I'm sitting there thinking, is she going to make it? I was in the moment. It's fantastic. It reminded me, and I haven't thought about this in a very long time, probably for good reason. When I was in middle school, maybe 6th grade, I was terrified of the adage, waiting an hour to eat before swimming. And I'd be at birthday parties and I'd have a piece of cake and I'd be like, no, I got 14 more minutes. And I would just sit there on the side, in a 3-foot pool. You could just stand up if you cramped up or something. And so much so that my friends' parents started referring to me as, quote, the boy who would not swim. And that moniker I haven't thought of in a long time. So thanks for that, Darcy. Okay, our next storyteller. I also met him at the Moth main stage earlier this year. He's an educator born and raised in Los Angeles. His stories have been featured on the Moth Radio Hour, KCRW, and CBS Radio nationwide. You brag much? Huh? We're going to add LAist to that list right now. Currently, he's an interpretive park ranger at Channel Islands National Park, where he brings the stories of the natural environment and the history of California to life. He's also a Jeopardy champion, and he is legally obligated to mention that fact as often as possible. So we're going to do this introduction as a Jeopardy clue, okay? So answer our next teller. Question: who is Tim Lopez? Give him a round of applause.
It's a little low.
He's so needy.
I mean, thanks, bro. All right, so yeah, I was born and raised here in Los Angeles, but a few years ago, I was living in New York, pursuing a career in part-time bartending, when my girlfriend got a job in Tucson, Arizona. So we moved out there, and she went right to work, and I continued to flounder, trying on various odd jobs until finally landing a role as a groundskeeper with Tucson Parks and Recreation at High Corbett Field, which is a collegiate and recreational series of baseball fields. And in that job, I was part of a crew that would come in every day and repair the baseball fields. So that entailed reclaying the mound and home plate, smoothing over the infield and repainting the lines, mowing the grass, and raking up infinity sunflower seeds before... It was basically putting everything back into optimal condition so that it could be destroyed that very evening, and then doing the whole thing the next morning. And there was a certain Zen appeal to this work that really connected with me. Something about restoring order to this chaos that really struck a chord with me. And I really enjoyed it. And I did that for a few months, and then we eventually moved back to New York, where I immediately resumed clutching at straws. I went back to work more or less right away for the restaurant that I'd been working for. I started teaching some after-school programs in the Bronx, where I would, show up and turn the chair around and get real with the kids for an hour. And I started dabbling in the nonprofit sector before ultimately finding it to be especially non-profitable for me personally. And then the pandemic happened. Everything I was doing pretty much evaporated, and we were all stuck in our apartment for months. And when things started opening up again, I knew that I wanted to work outside. And I thought back of my experiences in Tucson, and I really just wanted to get to work outside. So I started to look for opportunities with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. And I saw that they were hiring for something called an urban park ranger. Now, most people don't think of New York as a particularly natural environment, but I'm here to tell you that it is. It is one of the finest natural harbors in the world. There's over 30,000 acres of parkland, rivers, estuaries, old-growth forest, bird habitat, natural historical sites, and beaches. And the role of the urban park ranger is to connect everyday New Yorkers with the natural environment and world through education, recreation, wildlife management, and conservation. And so I figured that with my background in history and extremely casual educational settings, this could be a good fit for me. So I applied, and after a alarmingly short vetting and interview process, I was hired. But before I could be deployed into the field, I was informed that I needed to attend the New York City Parks Academy. Now, despite its lofty title, the Parks Academy is essentially a series of semi-abandoned bungalows beneath the RFK Bridge on Randall's Island, which is historically a meeting point for the cast-offs and misfits of New York City, myself and my fellow recruits included. And there we were on the very first day of Academy in our uniforms, lined up in what they call muster, with our boots shined and our logbooks at the ready to be inspected and or yelled at. Now, the person doing the yelling was one of the sergeants that was assigned to the academy training. His name was Sergeant Contreras. He was a short, wiry man with an obvious Napoleon complex who was in charge of the physical element of the training, which included self-defense and things of that nature. And then there was Sergeant Lee, who was a kinder and generally more normal human being, who was to be in charge of the academic portion of the training, which would include park rules and regulations, constitutional law, and use of force training. So if this is starting to sound super law enforcement-y to you, that's because it is. Unbeknownst to me, a urban park ranger is considered a peace officer in the state of New York, which means there's a certain state-mandated amount of training that goes into this work that we were all forced to endure. So, despite my, interest, experience, background, and personality all being more on the education side, we had to learn all of this enforcement stuff as part of our trainings before being deployed. And, at first the training started out very formally. There was a lot of rigid classroom instruction on things like park rules and regulations, what you can and can't do in a park, how to write a ticket, self-defense, and things of that nature. But as the days dragged into weeks, dragged into months, the overall atmosphere started to take on more of like a last week of school kind of energy. For example, the week where all we did all day long was watch episodes of Law and Order, which I assume had something to do with the constitutional law portion of the training. Or, the week that we watched a documentary from the 1980s about a very, very corrupt branch of the New York City Police Department, after which the instruction given was basically, just don't be like that. And, as it started to go on, we were all just kind of getting a little bit impatient and wanted to just get out and start working. But before that could happen, there was one more hurdle to clear, and that was pertaining to the wildlife management portion of the job, and that was where we learned to deal with something called animal conditions. Now, an animal condition is a situation in which an animal, whether that be wildlife or a domestic animal, finds its way into a New York City park where it's having interactions with people that cause it to either be dangerous to the animal or to the park patron, right? And then it is the responsibility of the urban park ranger to go in and to apprehend the animal and relocate it to another area of the park. And the most common of these conditions, an animal condition, is a raccoon condition. Raccoons are extremely wily, clever, very cagey animals that are very reluctant to be apprehended and or captured when they are healthy. When they're not healthy, they kind of tend to stumble around, kind of drunk. They're a lot easier to catch. And in a point of fact, they are rabies vector species, and they carry canine distemper, so there's definitely a need to do this. The problem is there's no way to train for this. At least not practically speaking. To their credit, the Parks Academy did their best to prepare us for this by at least familiarizing ourselves with the equipment, which were bite gloves, snare poles, and animal carriers, and practicing on stuffed animals. So with this training, we were deployed into the field. I was assigned to the borough of Queens. Fast forward to a couple of years later, I was no longer a fresh-faced idealistic recruit coming out of the academy. I was a grizzled veteran of the thin green line of New York City parks. I'd seen a lot of stuff out there. And one day in the summer, it was hot, I was on patrol, and a call went out over the radio. It was an animal condition. The nature of the condition was a swan on the loose. Now, again, I dealt with dozens of conditions at this time. I'd brought in a bunch of guinea pigs, a couple of hedgehogs, a couple of possums, one alligator, was unfortunately DOA, and a number of raccoons. But swans, birds in general, are kind of a whole different situation. I don't know what you know about the New York City birding community, but they can be a little intense. a little involved. And swans in particular tend to captivate the public imagination in ways that most animals do not, even birds. People find them graceful and beautiful. And they mate for life, which is something that people really respect in a wild animal. And, as soon as a swan appears in a New York City park, it immediately becomes a celebrity. Now, rangers hate swans for a variety of reasons. The first of which is they are considered an invasive species, which means they are not from the area, which in and of itself is not a problem. But when they arrive in an area, they tend to outcompete the local resources. They push out the other waterfowl, they build these huge ostentatious nests, and they generally make a spectacle of themselves. They are bullies, and they are gentrifiers. This particular swan was one of these. It had been spotted frolicking in various high-traffic areas of the park. It was where people were feeding it, which is bad for the animal as well as a violation of park rules and regulations. It also had several close encounters with off-leash dogs, which is another hot-button topic of parks enforcement, and was generally making a nuisance of itself. We were getting dozens of calls about it, tweets, and it was attracting a lot of attention. And so the higher-ups made a decision to send us in, to bring him in. Riding shotgun with me that day was my partner, Sal. And Sal and I went back a ways. We come up in the academy together, and we didn't always see eye to eye. He was a man of many contradictions. He was hot-tempered, kind of quick to anger, no friend to swans. But he was also a militant vegan who seemed to subsist entirely on dandelion sandwiches. In any event, we went out to the park. After interviewing a few witnesses, we were able to get an approximate location of the suspect. And we headed down to make the collar. Now, we get down there, and it's this area of the park that's kind of narrow, and there are a series of vernal pools, right? So these ponds that kind of form over the spring, and then they kind of reach their peak in the summer, and then sort of freeze over in the wintertime. And that's where this swan had been kind of lurking. It's kind of a reedy, marshy, muddy area. And we get down there, and we see the telltale signs of swan activity. There's like a little piece of like a little pile of potato chips, and like a little trail leading off into the brush. And we see that it's there, and we kind of head into, we head in, and we put on our equipment. We have to wear waders, right, because we're getting into a muddy situation. We bring our equipment, and we head out, and we find the swan in the middle of this pond-type area. We move in, Sal from one side, me from the other. I must stress that once again at this point, we are highly trained professionals, okay? So that said, it's a totally different situation, preparing for something, training for something, and experiencing it in real life in the field. And I don't know how many people have been up close to a swan, but they are bigger than you think. They are scarier than you think, and they are meaner than you think. And this particular swan, as soon as he saw us coming in, he knew the score, right? So he started kind of hissing and pumping his neck up and down and making this clicking sound, and kind of started beating his wings like this kind of like a perturbed dinosaur, and which from an evolutionary perspective, it basically is. And I look over at Sal, he looks over at me, and I'm wondering, is he going to come quietly, or are we going to have a problem? As it turns out, this was all for show. It was a bluff. We were able to coax the swan into a carrier and get it out of there with very minimal fuss. And as we loaded it onto the back of the truck, we were eye to eye. And I kind of looked into this cage, and I saw this animal looking back at me with this kind of resigned look on his face. And, I didn't see a bully. I didn't see a menace. I just saw, another creature just trying to make it in New York City. Maybe went, the wrong way, got off course, and just need a little nudge to get back in the right direction. And, I couldn't help but think of my own life. And maybe I needed a little nudge to get myself back in the right direction. And a short time after that, my girlfriend got a job back here in California. And so we moved cross-country again. But this time I knew what I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to apply and to get hired as a park ranger with the National Park Service here at Channel Islands National Park, where it is my privilege and my responsibility to interpret the natural world and tell its stories to Native Californians, to Californians and Americans of all kinds, and hopefully to bring a little bit of order to the chaos in everyone's lives. So thank you.
Give it up for Tim. How fun is that? I love that. I was just teaching a workshop maybe like a month and a half ago down in Champaign, Illinois. Who's been to Champaign, Illinois? Anyone? Oh, wow, there's a lot of Champaign heads out here. And I was walking through a parking lot with my friend Niti. We were teaching the workshop together, and there was a Canadian goose. And it was looking at us and kind of posturing. Niti said, hey, you got him. And Niti's, very, very tiny. And she goes, you got to make yourself real big, And I said, uh-huh. And then it started like hissing and flexing and coming at us. And Niti got real big, and then I was gone. I just took off. And she was so upset with me. She's like, you bailed on me. And it's like bears, right? You don't need to be faster than the bear. You just need to be faster than the person you're with. And I regret nothing. So there's that. Okay. Our third teller is an actor, author, podcaster, and storyteller. His book, Brown Enough, explores what it means to be brown in a black and white world. The book is part memoir, part social commentary. He also just wrote a kid's book called You're a Good Swimmer, and just did it at Vroman's, had a reading. He also hosts 2 podcast series with Sirius XM Stitcher, Brown Enough, which explores the parallel themes of this book through interview-style episodes, and Rubirosa, a 10-episode documentary-style investigation of Porfirio Rubirosa, who's a Dominican diplomat, race car driver, soldier, and polo player who is believed to be the inspiration for James Bond. Very cool. On screen, our next teller is known for his work on the Fox series Call Me Kat, opposite Mayim Bialik, Leslie Jordan, Kyla Pratt, and Cheyenne Jackson. Please help me welcome, give him a big round of applause, Christopher Rivas. Great. You got it.
That bio is so long. It's crazy. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay. All the time, more times than I can count, people love to come up to me and tell me, I just did my ancestry. Have you done yours? What's in your blood? This is usually followed by like, I'm a 10th Middle Eastern or 14% Sub-Saharan, or there's actually a little bit of Africa in me, to which I respond, the whole continent? One time after this writing workshop I was teaching, a woman came up to me and she said, oh my gosh, I resonate with that so much, and it confirms that I want to make a career change and become a life coach because we need more life coaches. She didn't say that part. And she said this was true because she just got her ancestry done. And she said, and I quote, I know there's a little bit of South Asian in me, and that resonates with me. I feel that part deeply in my soul. Personally, I have not done my ancestry. I have not traced my saliva to figure out my specific genome and chromosomes that make me as nervous and anxious as I am. Very. Partially because I do not feel completely comfortable with giving my DNA to a private company as if they don't have it. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Also, is it really as simple as saying, I am Dominican and Colombian? What does it really mean to ask and live the question, what is in my blood? What do my ancestors have to teach me, to share with me? What wisdoms, what knowings, what unknowings, what truths, what fears? What is in my blood? God, this question, it started to itch at me. And part of the problem is I don't actually even know my family. Like, nobody in my family ever talked about it. I never got the proverbial, like, oh, your dad was like, your grandpa was like a championship Dominican knitter. None of that. And so I called my cousin Edwin. Edwin is the only person who ever really talked about our family. And I said, yo, Ed, how come no one talks about our family? No one talks about the DR, not dad, not abuelita. And he said, oh, it's because they're probably embarrassed. Embarrassed of what? And that's when Ed proceeded to tell me about my great-grandfather, Juan Alba, who was the founder of a town in the Dominican Republic called La Caleta. Yo, finding a town is kind of pretty dope. Why would you be embarrassed? He said, it's not that simple. And he proceeded to tell me that Juan Alba was a cousin-in-law to Rafael Trujillo. Now, for those of you who do not know, Rafael Trujillo was the bloodiest dictator in Latin American history. I mean, this man with Haitian descent, Haitian blood himself, someone who baby powdered his face multiple times a day to move himself closer to whiteness, committed the overnight genocide and the racially motivated massacre of 20 to 30,000 Haitians in one day. Talk about hating your blood. I got off the phone with Edwin and I thought, oh God, is this how everyone feels when they get their 23andMe results back? Grimy. On one hand, it's like super nasty that I'm related to Trujillo in this way. Not by blood, but it's still like a weird part of my family tree. On the other hand, it's kind of a joke that like the DR is a small island, so everyone is related in one way or another. Anyway, I'd gone down the rabbit hole, and so the next obvious step was to assault my father. So on my next trip home, I took my dad to lunch and I just bombarded him with questions. I said, why didn't you tell me about this? Are you ashamed? What are you embarrassed of? What else are you keeping from me? Hey, is this why you never took me to the Dominican Republic or why you never wanted me to learn Spanish? Is this why Abuelita told me to sleep with a clothespin pinched to my nose like they do it back in the campo, to help keep it thin? Or why every day I still do this in the shower? Are you looking for an apology, my dad said? Because I'm not going to apologize to you. Oof, my dad. For those of you who don't know, my dad is like the Dominican Samuel L. Jackson. The Pulp Fiction one. He's got mad wisdom, but like wisdom with a hammer. He also has like resting get out of my face. Pops, I'm not looking for an apology. I just feel like I never, got any ancestral wisdom, any history. No, but I fed you. I kept you alive. I loved you. How's that for wisdom? Touché. I'm not going to apologize to you, Chris. Look at your life. You live a good life, right? Yeah, Pops, I live a good life. Okay, good. And so you want to know more about your history? You want to speak Spanish? Bien, perfecto. Estamos aquí, hablamos juntos. But don't come at me like that. History or no history, we did the best we could, and we think we did a damn good job. Yeah, Pops, you did a good job. And so we had a very awkward lunch in silence, and I let him have this one for now. And then a couple years later, I somehow create the opportunity to fly myself to the Dominican Republic for the first time for a piece that I'm making. It's a piece about my life and history and what's in my blood. And most importantly, I have enough cash to take someone with me. So I call my pops. Yo, Pops, let's go. He says, nah, I'm busy. I got work. I said, the trip's on a weekend. You don't work on a weekend. I don't want to get in the way. Hey, yo, Pops, you are the way. Come on. There's no other person I should be here with. There's no other person I should go with. Let's go. And when I land in the DR, y'all, let me tell you, I feel this peace wash over me. Like I'm not pretending or code switching. I'm just in a sea amongst myself, and it feels right. I'm like resting in my own skin. And my dad, on the other hand, he's like full Dominican at the rental car place. Yo, he's like, tigre this and que lo que that. Yo, I see this little boy in him, and it is beautiful. He is ecstatic. He also does not have to pretend here. He doesn't have to prioritize and decide what language do I give my kids for the best life possible. My dad, he's starting to get really nervous because we have a lot of families we're supposed to see here. The first person on the list is my dad's uncle Peto. He lives in La Caleta, the town my great-grandfather founded. And he doesn't have a phone number, and we don't have an address, and my dad hasn't been to the DR in 30 years, so who knows? We get some salchichon and aguacate, and we get on the road. And as we're driving, my dad says, I think a while back, Beto sold some of the land to the Mormon church. And I swear to whatever you believe in, that as he's saying this, 2 Mormon kids are crossing the street, like white shirt, ties, the whole thing. Let's just say they stick out, because on one side of the street, it's like Dominicans, merengue, dominoes, and then it's like 2 white Mormon kids. My dad, he basically jumps out of the car and he goes, hey, where's your house? These missionaries are terrified, y'all. Our house? Yeah, your house. You got a house, right? Our church? Yeah, your church. Where's your church? That way. And that way we head. And the closer and closer we get, my dad's memories, they start to solidify. And he says, oh, we're close. And then boom, I hear him say, that's it. That's my uncle. That's my uncle. He's just whispering. That's my uncle. I still get chills. That's my uncle. That's my uncle. And off in the distance is this old man. And yo, he's pretty fly, y'all. He's like got sunglasses on. He's sitting outside. He's surrounded by 3 dogs, and he's got mad swagger. He kind of reminds me of myself. And my pops. And my dad, he starts walking towards him, and he says, that's my uncle. That's my uncle. And his uncle Beto, he says, Guillermito, That's my father's nickname as a kid. And now they're both crying. I'm crying. The entire neighborhood is crying. The 2 Mormon kids are crying. My dad, he's not like an emotional person, especially not outwardly. I didn't expect him to cry, not like this, but I guess that's what the things in our blood do. They reveal to us who we are. That was a crazy time for me and my pops. I saw sides of him I'd never seen before. I met family that I didn't even know he had. He has a sister. I didn't know he had a sister. And one day at lunch, my dad, he starts to cry again. God, he cried more in this weekend than I'd seen him cry in 35 years of knowing him. And he starts to tell me about his mom. He starts to tell me about my mom's mom and how they came to this country and they struggled and they struggled and they hustled and they hustled and how hard it was. He said, I didn't want you to have that. I wanted things to be different for you. We just did the best we can. I didn't keep anything from you on purpose. I was just trying to give you a better life than what we had. You did, Pops. You did. You see, my father, he didn't keep anything from me on purpose or because he was ashamed of his Latinidad. He did what so many brown Americans are forced to do in this country. Assimilate, adapt. It's actually pretty universal for any outsider, the hope of possibility for their children. And I am not less because what I do not know about my blood or my history or my ancestors, because regardless of what is in your blood, your genomes and your chromosomes, you still have work to do when it comes to opening your heart, showing up, and meeting yourself day by day. Thank you.
Give it up for Christopher. Jeez. I've known Christopher a long time in the storytelling scene, and the second I started working with Story Collider, it was like, when can you do this, Christopher? When can you do this, Christopher? It was just kind of an ongoing thing. I'm so thank you very much for that. Yeah, give him a round of applause again. I'm with him with the 23andMe. I wouldn't go near it. I'm not going to spit in a tube and put it in the mail. I don't know how that works. I think that's how it works. I think I'm operating just on assumption right here, right now. But I was thinking about this earlier. I just logged on to just YouTube. They have me figured out more than 23andMe with the algorithm. It's just 3 categories. One is just people reupholstering mid-century furniture, which I've never done, but I'll watch that for hours. So they have that really locked in right there. The second one is catching fish that I'm never even going to see in real life, just watching that. And the third one is just guys who can throw frisbees real far. So I don't know what I did to be in this sector of the internet, but that's my internet genome right there. Here's the thing. Our final teller, I met at a table read back in 2016, and we immediately connected, and her and her husband, John, who's right over there, they've become like family to me. They're wonderful. They're a big part of the reason why I'm still here doing stories and writing and doing stuff like that. They're just so affirmational, which in turn kind of translates by the transitive property, and me pushing for this state kind of means you're all here because of this person, right? So that's fun. You can see our final teller on Gilmore Girls playing the role of Gypsy. She's also been on Parenthood, Scandal. I'm adding these credits. She didn't put on these in. I'm putting these in. Parenthood, Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and My Best Friend's Wedding. Pretty much any show or movie you've ever loved. Fun fact, with this running order, she also played Christopher's mom on Call Me Kat. This is a full circle moment we're all in right now. There's a generation right here. Currently, you can see her on Max's Emmy-nominated series, Hacks. Yeah. Please give a warm welcome to who is genuinely the best person you can ever go to a flea market with, and I mean that, Rose Abdu. Give her a round of applause.
This is good. Thank you so much, Bryan. Thank you. It's really a delight to be here. When I was a young girl, about age 5, kindergarten, my dream was to be a tour guide. Oh, I just thought, that's so special. Everyone's looking at you, but you're also imparting important information. And I would sit in the back of my father's Delta 88 Oldsmobile and take the seatbelt and use it as a microphone. On our right, Dairy Queen. On our left, you'll notice a Stuckey's. Stuckey's, it keeps America going. I thought tour guides got to wear little navy blue suit jackets, and they were just in the front of the bus or the boat, and everyone was looking at them. So I wanted to have attention on me, but I still wanted to be educating while I had the attention. Then in elementary school, around age 9, I decided I want to be a newscaster. I threw away tour guide, and I thought, yeah, newscaster. Oh, that was also important. You still got to wear a little navy blue jacket. And then I added to this dream maybe a sensible belted trench coat. And I could still grab the microphone and stand in front of important buildings and give you news you could use. So when anyone asked me what I wanted to be, I'd say foreign correspondent. So then around junior high and high school, I realized I could move this dream forward. My high school, Southfield, Michigan, had a radio station. So I decided to sign up for radio class. 13 years old. I was the only freshman allowed in. I was the only girl. The station manager was this kind of crabby man named Mr. Snedden. And he wore these polyester leisure suits, and he had a perm. So I thought he was hip like the dad on the Brady Bunch because he had a perm. And I loved the radio station because it was wood paneled and low lighting and had couches and looked very different than the rest of the high school. And Mr. Snedden called me into his office and he said, "Rose, close the door." I always felt like he talked like he was holding back a large burp.
"Rose, I'm going to be doing an editorial on the air for the first time today in many years. And I want you to take over the headlines at noon."
The headlines. This was huge. No freshman, no girl had ever been asked to do the headlines. Oh my gosh, this was major. I said, "Thank you, Mr. Snedden. Thank you for the opportunity. You will not be disappointed." Picture me, 13, green corduroy pantsuit, aviator glasses, Dorothy Hamill wedge haircut. From WSHJ News Central, I'm Rose Abdu reporting. I was so excited. So I went out into the lounge to share my news with the senior and junior cool hip wannabe DJ guys, okay? And there was Mark, David, Howard, and Paul, all sitting around the lounge. And I heard one say to the other, "Snedden's on the rag today." What? I never heard that expression before. Have you? On the rag? Do you know? Okay, so I concluded, because Mr. Snedden just told me it was a special day because he was going to be doing an editorial on the air for the first time in many years, that the same way that tube is kind of a cool way of saying television, rag has got to mean radio. So I said, "I'm on the rag today."
"Hey, Rose, you sound pretty happy about that."
Well, I am. It's my first time on the rag.
Hey, good for you, Rose.
Yeah, good for me. And if it goes well, I'm probably going to be on the rag all year. What? They were laughing. I was like, what is going on? I don't remember who clarified and told me what on the rag really meant. I just knew that I was just mortified because I'd talked about my lady time. My lady time. I couldn't even say the words. My biology is my business. Oh, I can't believe I shared my lady time with those guys. In my high school, we also had a pool. And I got assigned swimming at 8 o'clock in the morning. As in, get to school, take the plunge. Oh my God. 8 o'clock in the morning. You had to take swimming or the physical education credit didn't count. And you'd go down this long flight of stairs to the basement of the school where the indoor pool was. And there was a closet with a half door, and behind that half door sat Wilma. with her chlorine blonde stripped hair that sat atop her head like a little thatched roof. And she would size you up. Oh, yeah, you look like you need an extra large, honey. Thanks, Wilma. And she would hand you the black regulation school tank suit, okay, that when you plunged into the water would get wet, and the material, what was it made out of? It would just leave your body. It would float away from you. And you had to take like a shoelace from your sneaker and tie it up in the back like a halter. It was co-ed swimming. Co-ed, yeah. The only way to get out of this was if you had your lady time. And then if you did, Mr. Finlayson, the 6-foot-tall, silver-haired swim coach, would put a red magic marker M on the poster-sized attendance chart. Yeah. It was alphabetical. Rose Abdu, M. Oh, my God. So I decided to have my period 3 times a month. Because I figured if the whole school already thought I was on the rag all year, I might as well use it to get out of swimming. My lady time, it was not Mr. Finlayson's business. My biology was my business. Oh my God, I can't believe I had to talk about it with him. Well, after high school, by the time I got to college, I just got rid of the whole idea of being a newscaster because at Michigan State in 1980, the lines for registration were really, really long for the classes that I would need for the newscaster, like telecom. Like I needed econ and all kinds of other stuff, and I didn't want to wait in line. So really, my impatience has led me to an acting career. Because the theater classes lines were so short. Before I knew it, I had all these credits, and I had done 25 plays at Michigan State, and my stage work led me to Chicago, Second City, and I was on stage there. And then that led me to television. I got cast in an 8-episode television series called Johnny Bago for CBS. And I got cast off a VHS tape. Some of you might not even know what that is. But I was so excited to get to California and be on set and make this television show. Johnny Bago was about an ex-mafia wife turned parole officer chasing her husband around the country in a Winnebago. Hence the name Johnny Bago. I played Beverly Florio, the parole officer. We did scenes with 200 Winnebagos by the ocean and in the desert in a teepee, and in this particular episode, in a circus. And I got the script and thought, I have a scene with a lion? Oh my gosh. Well, they'll, do something else to make a lion. There's not gonna be a real lion. And the stunt coordinator came to my trailer and said, oh no, there's gonna be a real lion. So the lion trainer, Hubert, and the stunt coordinator, Norman, took me into this huge lion cage. And for rehearsal, the lion was inside a smaller cage. They explained to me there would be a wire running through the middle of the cage, an electric current running through the wire, so that if the lion got too close to me, if he advanced, the electric current would shock him and he would retreat. And I said, oh no, it's gonna shock him? I don't want it to hurt him. And yet I did. So I said, okay. And they said, okay, just don't turn around, Rose. Do not turn around. Do not make eye contact with the lion. I saw Hubert, the sinewy, tall animal trainer. He's a lion trainer, and he had a crossbody leather bag with this full of raw meat and this long pitchfork. And I could see him, but I can't turn around because the lion's behind me, and all I hear is Hubert saying, Sudan, no! Sudan, no! I'm like, what's he doing? What's he doing? What's he doing? What's he doing? And I could feel his hot lion breath on the back of my legs. I said, oh my God, okay, I can do this. And then they sent me back to my trailer to put on my parole officer outfit while we were getting ready to shoot the scene. In the middle of getting dressed, a knock on the trailer door. I open it, it's Hubert and Norman, the stunt coordinator, 6 feet tall men. Can we come in, Rose? Okay. So the 3 of us are sitting on this tiny couch in my trailer. Yeah. I said, Rose, listen, the lion's a bit agitated because we're filming the scene at night. Lions don't do very well after sundown, so he's agitated. I said, he's agitated? Can you feed him? Did you feed him? Make sure you feed him. They wanted to examine my hands and my forearms. They said it's good that they've given you an outfit that really covers you up, but we need to look at your hands and your forearms. They said they were looking for scratches, any tiny scratch, even a paper cut. And Norman said to me, Rose, if the lion smells even the smallest amount of blood, we're just not sure what he might do. And then he said, Rose, I need to ask you a personal question. Is it that time of the month? I said, no. No, sir, it's not. I thought, oh my God, I gotta talk about my lady time with these two. My biology is my business. My biology is my business. In this case, it was a little bit their business too. A little bit. They were invested. And I just thought, oh my God, this is horrifying. And I just thought, what? I had a flashback to high school, and I thought, what would have happened if I would have said yes? What would they have done? I could just imagine them coming and painting a big red M on my trailer door. Well, the scene went off without a hitch. I was fine. The lion was fine. You can look it up on YouTube, Johnny Bago. The episode's called Big Top Bago, and you could see me in the cage with the lion. And oh my God, the series went on to get 12 million viewers, which in the summer of 1993 was considered a huge flop. And it was not canceled, it just was not renewed. So I did more television, and my work in television led me to get an invitation for the Creative Coalition. The Creative Coalition is a very interesting group composed of members of the entertainment industry that use their voices to advocate on issues of importance, industry-related, and just social issues. And this summer, I was asked to be one of 15 delegates to travel to Washington, D.C. I was so honored. Even the word delegate, sounded so special. And we were going on behalf of AARP to pass bills and talk to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And it was just really a great day, and they told us it's going to be a long day of advocacy from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We will not be going back to the hotel. So I packed a very smart-looking little leather tote bag with everything that I thought I or some of my colleagues might need. And there we were, the buildings of the Capitol. Oh, it's just beautiful, the mosaic in the floor and the paintings. And we walked from the Longworth to the Rayburn. It was just magnificent. The inlaid mosaic tile work and painting after painting, groups of men. And there's more men. Look how many men. Wow, that's a lot of men. Oh, there they are around a desk. So many men. And there we were in Statuatory Hall, where there's 100 beautiful statues of men. And there's 11 women, but mostly men. Oh, it was very exciting, and it was a long, great day of advocacy and telling personal stories, and we got to have lunch in the House of Representatives dining room. Did you know that Wednesday is Fried Chicken Day at the House of Representatives? It is. Well, after lunch, we went to freshen up, and I don't know how to tell you this other than to just tell you what happened. I got my lady time. I got my lady time. That is a big surprise to me because it has been a couple of years. And I thought, what's going on? Just being in this important historical group of buildings with all this energy has made my biological clock roll back to 1976. This can't be happening. And yet it is. And I thought the ecosystem of Rose Abdou, in that ecosystem, this is supposed to be settled law. Yet here we are. And good thing I had supplies that I brought for my much younger colleagues. I walked out, I saw a group of the lady delegates, and I walked over to them and I said, "Well, I got my period. Right here in the halls of Congress, right at the bathroom closest to Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' office. I got my period. Yep, I sure did. And we gathered outside to take a picture of the 2024 delegate class on the steps. And I thought, oh my God, I'm wearing a navy blue blazer. And I'm standing in front of an important building. And I'm not holding a microphone, but I am using my voice to advocate on powerful issues and import important information. And I really felt like my younger self again, in more ways than one. Thank you.
Give it up for Rose. How fun is that? I love a first full circle moment like that coming back around. That's so satisfying. We were having coffee a while ago, and I was trying to get Rose to do Story Collider, and I'm like, how about something with the lion, right? And she's like, oh, I didn't know I told you about that. And we started talking about it, and that led to this. I love the theme and the tie-in. It's more pertinent than ever. Thank you so much. Give her another round of applause. And give one more big round of applause for Oliver. That's our show. So we have Darcy, Tim, Christopher, Rose. Please let them hear it. Here's the thing. If this is something you would like to do, you can pitch us at storycollider.org. We also have workshops available. You can learn more about it there, too. Here's the thing. You can sign up for updates. We're going to be back here. The next date is set December 3rd. It is a Tuesday. Put it on your calendar. Please come back. Some of the tellers who will be there that evening are already with you right now. How spooky is that? They're like spies. One of them just laughed right there. I just heard him. So, final thank yous just to everyone here at LAist. We couldn't do it without you. We have John Cohn, who's back there, our executive director. We have Becca Stummy. I think she stepped out, but she's one of the best. We have Tony Federico. He's the man behind the curtain. Kristen Ranger's back there. Michael Leva's the tech assistant. Colin Haskins, Ellie Montenegro. Those are our events interns with the slime out there. Thank you for taking the plunge with us. That's the theme. But here's the thing. Thank you so much. Again, December 3rd. Tuesday, put on your calendar, sign up, storycollider.org. And our tellers are up here. If you just want to tell them how great you think they are, you can do that. And thank you again. This was wonderful, and we'll see you soon. Have a great night.